We found ourselves hurtling through a landscape that defied logic. The surroundings were no longer the carnival or even the town of Ridgewood. Instead, we were surrounded by a desolate expanse of jagged rocks and swirling, stormy skies. Lightning illuminated the scene in erratic flashes, revealing shadowy figures moving in the distance. The air was thick with a suffocating heaviness, and the whispers from before now formed words in a language I couldn't understand. Lisa clutched my arm, her face pale. "This isn't right. Where are we?" I didn't have an answer. None of us did. My friend Ethan, usually the brave one in the group, was gripping the restraint bar so tightly that his knuckles had turned white. The spectral chariot raced along a track that seemed to materialize out of thin air, twisting and spiraling into an abyss. "This has to be part of the ride," Ethan shouted, though his voice lacked conviction. Deep down, we all knew this wasn't part of any carnival experience. The runes on the car, once mesmerizing, now emitted a harsh, almost menacing light. The whispers grew louder, their words incomprehensible, but their intent clear. We weren't supposed to be here. The car slowed as we approached what appeared to be a massive, crumbling archway. It was adorned with the same runes that covered the car, only these seemed older, their glow faint and flickering. Beyond the archway, a massive chasm stretched into infinity, its depths obscured by swirling mist. The track ended abruptly, leading nowhere. This is insane," Lisa cried, her voice breaking. "We have to get off." The car, however, had other plans. It came to a jerking stop just before the edge of the chasm. For a moment, everything was silent. The whispers ceased, the wind stilled, and even the oppressive hum of the runes dulled. We sat there, suspended in the silence, every breath loud and heavy. And then, a voice, deep, resonant, and filled with a chilling authority spoke. "You should not have come here." The voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. The air around us grew colder still, our breaths visible in the dim light. Ethan tried to speak, but his words caught in his throat. The car began to tremble, the runes flaring with an angry, fiery glow. The track ahead shimmered, and a new path emerged, stretching across the chasm and into the darkness. Against every instinct screaming at me to stay put, the car began to move again, inching forward onto the new track. As we crossed the chasm, the whispers returned, this time louder and more insistent. "Turn back," one voice hissed. "You are not welcome," said another. But the car pressed on, and we were powerless to stop it. Below us, the mist in the chasm began to swirl faster, shapes forming and dissolving within it. I caught glimpses of faces twisted, tormented faces staring up at us with hollow eyes. "Do you see that?" Lisa whispered, her voice trembling. I nodded, unable to tear my gaze away from the horrifying scene below. The faces seemed to grow more distinct, their mouths moving as if screaming, though no sound emerged. The car picked up speed, hurtling toward what appeared to be a massive fortress made of obsidian, its jagged spires piercing the stormy sky. As we approached, the fortress gates creaked open, revealing a vast, cavernous interior bathed in an unnatural greenish light. The car slowed and came to a stop inside. For a moment, we were frozen in place, too terrified to move or speak. "Welcome," the deep voice intoned again, echoing through the chamber. "Few have dared to ride the Phantom Fury to its true destination. Fewer still have returned." The voice was accompanied by a figure stepping out of the shadows. It was tall, cloaked in dark robes that seemed to shimmer like oil on water. Its face was obscured by a hood, but two glowing eyes peered out, their gaze piercing and unrelenting. "Why are we here?" Ethan finally managed to ask, his voice cracking. "You sought thrill," the figure replied. "You sought the unknown. And so, the unknown has found you." The figure raised a hand, and the runes on the car flared brighter than ever. A sharp pain shot through my chest, and I clutched at it, gasping. Around me, my friends were experiencing the same agony, their cries echoing in the vast chamber. "You are marked now," the figure said, "bound to this place. Unless what?" Lisa choked out, tears streaming down her face. "Unless you can prove your worth," the figure replied, its tone almost amused. "A trial awaits. Succeed, and you may leave. Fail, and you will join the others." With a wave of its hand, the car began to move again, this time deeper into the fortress. The track twisted and turned, leading us through labyrinthine corridors and cavernous halls. Shadows danced along the walls, and the whispers continued, now joined by guttural growls and the occasional scream. The car came to another stop, this time in a massive circular chamber. In the center was a pedestal holding a glowing orb, its light pulsating like a heartbeat. Around the chamber, tall figures in tattered cloaks stood motionless, their faces hidden beneath hoods. "Your trial," the deep voice announced, echoing through the chamber. "Take the orb and prove your strength. But beware, the Watchers do not take kindly to failure." Ethan looked at us, his face a mask of fear and determination. "We have no choice," he said. "We have to do this." Slowly, we climbed out of the car, our legs shaky and our hearts pounding. The moment we stepped onto the chamber floor, the Watchers began to stir, their heads turning in unison to face us. Their hollow eyes glowed faintly, and a low growl emanated from the group. Lisa reached for my hand, and I squeezed it tightly. Together, we moved toward the pedestal, each step heavier than the last. The air seemed to press down on us, and the whispers grew louder, now screaming in a chaotic chorus. As we reached the pedestal, Ethan extended a trembling hand toward the orb. The moment his fingers touched it, the chamber erupted in chaos. The Watchers surged forward, their movements unnaturally fast. The whispers turned into deafening roars, and the ground beneath us began to shake. "Run!" I shouted, grabbing Lisa and pulling her toward the car. Ethan clutched the orb and sprinted after us, the watchers closing in. We leapt into the car just as the track began to collapse behind us. The car jolted to life, racing away from the chamber at breakneck speed. The fortress around us crumbled, the walls and ceilings collapsing into dust. The whispers faded, replaced by the roar of destruction. And then, just as suddenly as it began, it was over. We were back at the carnival, the Phantom Fury's steel structure looming above us. The car came to a stop, and the restraints released. We stumbled out, gasping for air and clutching at each other. The elderly ride operator was waiting for us, his expression unreadable. "You made it," he said, his voice tinged with something like respect. "Not many do." Ethan held up the orb, its light now dim. "What do we do with this?" he asked. The operator shook his head. "Keep it. It's yours now. But remember, some doors, once opened, can never be closed." As we walked away, the carnival lights seemed brighter, the laughter and music louder. But none of it felt the same. The Phantom Fury had changed us, left its mark in ways we couldn't yet understand. And in the distance, the ride stood silent, its glowing runes pulsing softly, waiting for its next victims. We found ourselves in a place that was both familiar and alien. The tracks stretched out before us, but the surroundings had changed. The carnival was gone, replaced by a desolate landscape bathed in an eerie green glow. Towering skeletal trees dotted the horizon, their twisted branches clawing at the sky. The air was heavy, filled with a sense of foreboding that made my skin crawl. The car slowed, coasting along the track as if guided by an unseen force. Up ahead, a figure stood on the platform. Clad in tattered robes, their face obscured by a hood, they raised a skeletal hand and pointed directly at us. A chilling voice echoed in my mind, though their lips did not move. "You should not have come here." Panic set in as the car lurched forward, accelerating rapidly. The figure disappeared from view, but the oppressive sense of dread remained. The ride twisted and turned through the surreal landscape, the tracks now glowing with an unearthly light. Shadows danced in the periphery, shapes that seemed to move and shift just out of sight. "What is this place?" Lisa whispered, clutching the safety bar tightly. None of us had an answer. The ride continued, each twist and turn more disorienting than the last. The voices returned, louder this time, their whispers forming fragmented sentences. "Turn back. You don't belong. The price must be paid." My breath caught as the car approached a massive loop. As we climbed, I caught a glimpse of the ground below. It wasn't Earth, but a swirling vortex of light and shadow, pulling at my gaze with an almost hypnotic force. The car crested the loop, and for a brief moment, everything went silent. Then, a deafening roar shattered the stillness. The car hurtled forward, the tracks now glowing red hot. Heat radiated around us, and the air was filled with the acrid smell of burning metal. My heart pounded in my chest as I realized the restraints were beginning to loosen. Desperation took over, and I gripped the safety bar as tightly as I could. "Hold on!" someone screamed, though I couldn't tell who. The car spiraled into a corkscrew, the forces threatening to tear us from our seats. And then, with a blinding flash of light, everything stopped. We were back at the carnival. The car coasted to a gentle stop at the platform, the cheerful sounds of the carnival filling the air once more. For a moment, none of us moved, too stunned to speak. The restraints lifted, and we stumbled out of the car, our legs unsteady beneath us. The ride operator was nowhere to be seen. "What the hell just happened?" Lisa asked, her voice shaky. None of us had an answer. As we walked away, I glanced back at the Phantom Fury. The ride stood silent, its spectral chariots waiting for the next group of unsuspecting riders. But something caught my eye. Carved into the metal of the car we had just exited were the words, "The price has been paid." We left the carnival that night, each of us carrying the weight of what we had experienced. The Phantom Fury became the stuff of legend, its mysteries never fully explained. But one thing was certain: the ride was more than just an attraction. It was a doorway to something far beyond our understanding. And I, for one, would never step foot on it again. Months passed, but the memory of that night clung to me like a shadow. Sleep was elusive, and when it came, it brought vivid dreams, no, nightmares of the desolate landscape and the hooded figure. The whispers followed me, their cryptic warnings echoing in my mind. Lisa tried to rationalize it. It was just a hallucination, some elaborate trick, she said over coffee one morning. But her trembling hands betrayed her. She hadn't been sleeping either. We weren't the only ones affected. Mark, who had been with us that night, stopped returning our calls. When we finally went to his apartment, we found it empty. His landlord claimed he'd moved out in the middle of the night without a word. His car was still in the parking lot, keys in the ignition. Then there was Sarah. She had been the calmest among us during the ride, but she started drawing. Sketches of the vortex, the hooded figure, the skeletal trees. Her apartment walls were covered in them. "I'm trying to remember," she explained, though her eyes looked haunted. "I feel like we forgot something important." The thought chilled me. Had we left something behind? Or worse, had we brought something back? One evening, as I was organizing some old papers, I found a ticket stub from the Phantom Fury. The words, "Admit One," were emblazoned in faded gold. I don't remember keeping it. As I stared at it, the whispers returned, clearer than ever. The price must be paid. The lights in my apartment flickered. The air grew cold, and for a moment, I felt like I was back on the ride, hurtling through that alien landscape. A knock at the door snapped me out of it. When I opened it, no one was there. But a single skeletal tree branch lay on the welcome mat, its twisted form unmistakable. I called Lisa immediately. "We need to go back," I said, my voice trembling. "Are you out of your mind?" She shot back. "Why would we ever go near that place again?" "Because it's not over," I whispered. "You feel it too, don't you?" She didn't answer, but the silence spoke volumes. The next weekend, we found ourselves back at the carnival. It was exactly as we'd left it, bright, loud, and full of life. But the phantom fury loomed in the distance, its shadowy presence casting a pall over the festivities. As we approached, I noticed something different. The ticket booth was empty, and the ride's platform was shrouded in mist. "Are we really doing this?" Lisa asked, her voice barely audible over the carnival's din. "We don't have a choice," I replied. We climbed into the car, the restraints clicking into place. The ride began its ascent, and the familiar sense of dread returned. This time, the hooded figure appeared sooner, standing on the first platform. "You came back," the voice echoed in our minds. "But you cannot leave again." The ride plunged into darkness, and the screams began.